I always thought my brother's issues would resolve themselves over time, that one day we'd look back and laugh about our messy childhood while sharing drinks at a cozy cafe. But that fantasy evaporated the moment my mother called me during the final semester of my college journey. My name is Amara, and I was just 3 months away from graduating with a degree in finance when everything crumbled. I was buried in my dorm's common area, surrounded by accounting textbooks and a half-empty latte when my phone buzzed. "Sweetheart, we need to talk about your tuition," my mom said, her tone laced with the tension I'd grown too familiar with. I tensed, the pit of my stomach tightening. "What's wrong?" "There's been a change," she replied, with the calm of someone delivering bad news far too often. I felt a chill creep through me. "What change?" "Liam needs to start a new therapy program," she said, her words rushing out. "It's innovative, intensive, and expensive. Your father and I have decided to redirect the rest of your college fund to cover it." The room seemed to blur. My grip on my pen slackened. "Mom, I'm 3 months from finishing. I can't." "I know this isn't what you wanted to hear," she interrupted, her voice taking on that practiced tone of justification. "But your brother is struggling again. He needs this. We've already enrolled him in the program." Of course, he was struggling again. Liam's episodes always seemed conveniently timed, like when I graduated high school and he locked himself in the bathroom, or when I got accepted to college and he staged a dramatic breakdown in front of the family. "I have rent to pay, books to buy. How am I supposed to manage without that money?" My voice cracked, equal parts frustration and disbelief. "You've always been so strong, Amara," she said, with a placating softness that only infuriated me further. "I know you'll figure something out. Maybe look into loans? Liam doesn't have your resilience." The room's fluorescent lights bore down on me as I stared at the notes sprawled before me. Years of tireless effort, maintaining straight A's, juggling part-time jobs, keeping everything afloat. None of it seemed to matter. In this family, Liam's needs always came first. "When exactly did this all happen?" I asked, though deep down I already knew. "Last Tuesday," she admitted quietly. I let out a hollow laugh. "You mean the day after I told you about my internship offer in Seattle?" Her silence was all the confirmation I needed. "Amara, don't make this harder than it has to be. We're family, and family supports each other." "Family," I echoed bitterly, the word catching in my throat. I ended the call and slumped back in my seat, staring blankly at the students bustling around me. Their lives, their struggles, all of it seemed so mundane compared to the tornado that had just torn through mine. A buzz brought me back to reality. A text from Liam. "Sorry about your tuition," pleading face. "Maybe it's for the best? I'd love for you to stay closer to home. I miss you." His message was peppered with emojis and casual sweetness, like he wasn't actively derailing my future. I could picture his self-satisfied grin, the way he'd charm our parents into believing his every action was a cry for help. Another buzz this time. It was Adrian, my fiancé. "Still on for dinner?" I stared at the message, thinking about the excitement we'd shared over my Seattle opportunity, the apartment listings we'd browsed late into the night, the dreams we'd built together. Dreams that now felt impossibly out of reach because Liam couldn't stand the thought of anyone else's spotlight. Something shifted in me then. Maybe it was the trivial tone of Liam's text, or the casual way my mother had dismissed my years of hard work. Or maybe it was a lifetime of being shoved aside in favor of my brother's endless crises. I texted Adrian back. "Can we talk now? I need to figure something out." For the first time, I decided it was my turn to come first. The obligatory family dinner that evening felt like a well-rehearsed charade. Adrian and I had spent the afternoon crafting a plan to salvage what we could of my future, but now I was walking into the lion's den, ready to confront the people who'd blindsided me. When I arrived, Liam was already at the table, his voice animated as he described his new therapy program. He wore one of his perfectly tailored outfits, designed to evoke a vulnerable charm that never failed to win sympathy. "Amara," he exclaimed, leaping to hug me. "I was just telling Mom and Dad about Dr. Pritchard. He's incredible." I returned the hug stiffly, catching the faint scent of cologne, no doubt another indulgence courtesy of my parents. "That's great." My dad looked up briefly, his phone glued to his hand as usual. Take a seat. Dinner's ready. The table was set with our best dinnerware, an unmistakable signal that this was one of Liam's special nights. So, my mom began cheerfully, ladling soup into bowls. Liam's thinking of starting some community college classes soon. Isn't that exciting? I stabbed a piece of bread harder than I intended. Perfect timing. Liam's eyes flicked toward me, a glint of triumph barely concealed. Well, you've always inspired me, Amara. Watching you succeed, it made me realize I should start thinking about my own future. Dad cleared his throat, his tone overly casual. By the way, have you figured out your tuition situation yet? You mean the situation where you decided my education doesn't matter? The words flew out sharper than I intended. My mother's knife clattered against her plate. Amara, we've been over this. Your brother needs help. I know. I turned to Liam. How did you try it this time? Pills? Cuts? Or was it just another empty threat? Amara, my father's tone was low and warm. That's enough. Liam's lower lip crumpled, his eyes glistening with perfectly timed tears. I can't believe you'd say that. You know how hard this is for me. Hard for you. I laughed bitterly. Do you ever stop to think about how hard it is for the rest of us? For me? Or does that never cross your mind while you're wrecking my life? I didn't ask them to do that. Liam protested, though the flicker of satisfaction in his eyes was crazy. My mother reached out to hold Liam's hand. Sweetheart, don't get upset. Dr. Pritchard said we need to avoid stressors. Of course, I shot back. I wouldn't want Liam to face even a shred of accountability. That's not fair, my father said, his tone defensive. Your brother is struggling. Is he? Or is he just really good at playing all of you? Liam pushed back his chair, his face a picture of righteous anguish as tears spilled over. I can't do this. I think I'm having a panic attack. As if on cue, both my parents sprang into action, rushing to comfort him. I sat frozen, watching them fuss over him like he was the fragile centerpiece of our family. Meanwhile, all the times I'd silently dealt with my own pain and struggles went unnoticed, as always. I'm leaving, I said abruptly, standing up. Don't be ridiculous, my mother snapped. Sit down and eat your dinner. No, I grabbed my bag. I need to figure out how to salvage my life since you've decided Liam's crisis is more important than anything I've worked for. Liam's sobs grew louder. My mother glared at me. See what you've done? He was making progress and now. Now what? I challenged. Now he'll need more therapy? More attention? More of the money you stole from me. As I turned to leave, Liam's voice cut through the tension. I'm sorry you're upset, Amara. Maybe you should join my therapy group. We could work through this together. I stopped in the doorway, looking back at the scene, Liam, playing the perfect victim, surrounded by our parents' unending sympathy. My barely touched dinner. The same performance I'd watched unfold my entire life. You know what, Liam? Keep the money. Keep all of it. But one day, when I'm gone and you have no one left to step on, don't say I didn't warn you. I walked out, ignoring my mother's frantic calls to come back. In the car, my phone buzzed with a message from Liam. I really do want to get better, Amara. Don't you want that for me too? I stared at the message before deleting it. For the first time in my life, I didn't care if Liam got better. I just wanted to be free. After that disaster of a dinner, I went to my grandmother Evelyn's house. She'd always been my anchor, the one person in the family who saw through Liam's facade. But when I arrived, I found her at the kitchen table, her face more troubled than I'd ever seen. I was hoping you'd come by, she said, sliding a cup of tea toward me. We need to talk about your brother. My stomach twisted. What did he do now? He came to me last week, crying about needing money for an experimental therapy. Said your parents couldn't afford it. Evelyn's hands trembled slightly as she lifted her cup. I gave him $5,000. You what? My head spun. Grandma, that money was supposed to come from my tuition. I know that now. Her voice turned steely. I called your mother yesterday to check on how the therapy was going. Imagine my surprise when she had no idea what I was talking about. A knock at the door interrupted us. Through the window, I saw Liam on the porch, dressed in the same carefully chosen outfit he'd worn at dinner. Evelyn's expression hardened. Perfect timing, she muttered, standing to answer the door. Liam walked in like he owned the place. "Grandma, I can explain." His voice faltered when he saw me. "Amara, what are you doing here?" "Funny," I said coldly. "I was about to ask you the same thing." "I came to talk to Grandma about the therapy program," Liam said, his voice shaky. "There's been a misunderstanding." "Stop," Evelyn's sharp tone cut him off. "Where's my money, Liam?" I spent it," Liam stammered, tears forming on cue. "But it was for something important. I needed a new car." "Or was it for those designer clothes?" I snapped. "Or that overpriced cologne you reek of?" Liam's carefully maintained facade cracked, revealing his true self for a brief moment. "You don't understand. They always gave you everything." I just wanted. "They gave me everything?" I shot to my feet, my voice shaking with anger. "They just destroyed my entire future for you. Because I need help." Liam wailed, his voice quivering theatrically, though his eyes remained dry. "I'm sick, Amara. Why can't you understand that?" "The only thing sick about you is your addiction to lying," Evelyn said, her voice cold and deliberate. "I've watched you manipulate this family for years. But stealing from me? That's a new level of betrayal." Liam's demeanor shifted in an instant. Vulnerability gave way to anger, his mask cracking. "Fine. Keep your precious money. I'll just tell Mom and Dad how you both ganged up on me when I came here asking for help. They'll believe me. They always do." "Get out," Evelyn commanded, her tone like steel. "And don't come back until you're ready to face the truth." Liam froze for a moment, as if calculating his next move, before storming out, slamming the door behind him. Silence filled the room, broken only by the faint buzz of my phone, messages from my mother, undoubtedly Harper's twisted version of events already taking root. Evelyn sighed deeply, her hands trembling as she set her teacup down. "I'm sorry, Amara. I should have seen through his lies. He's fooled all of us at some point." I stared into my now cold tea, my chest heavy with exhaustion. "That's his superpower." "Not anymore." Evelyn's voice was firm as she reached for her checkbook. "I'm giving you the money for your tuition." "Grandma, no," I protested. "I can't let you." "You can and you will." She began writing, her pen gliding across the check. "I've stayed quiet too long, letting your parents and Liam walk all over you. It's time someone stood up for you." My phone buzzed again. A message from Liam. "Hope you're happy. Mom and Dad are furious with you and Grandma. Good luck explaining yourself." I showed Evelyn the text. She shook her head, a grim smile on her lips. "You know what happens to people who cry wolf too many times? One day, the wolf comes for real, and no one's left to help." Her words struck a chord. Something inside me shifted, a clarity I hadn't felt before. Liam had pushed too far, too many times. He thought he could manipulate his way out of anything, but every con has a breaking point. And he'd just reached his. I pulled out my phone and began typing a list of evidence: dates, lies, stolen money, and fake crises. Every incident where Liam had manipulated us, hurt us, or derailed my life. Evelyn raised an eyebrow. "What are you doing?" "Writing my own version of the story," I said, determination hardening my voice. "And this time, Liam doesn't get to rewrite it." The evidence I compiled stayed untouched on my phone for 3 days. I debated whether to send it to my parents, knowing it would create a storm. But then my mother called with news that made the decision for me. "We're selling the house," she announced, her tone brisk and detached. "Liam's new therapy program is in New York, and we need the funds to make it happen." I nearly dropped my coffee. "You're selling the house?" "The one we grew up in." "We all are," she said, as if it were the most logical thing in the world. "Your father already found a job there. A fresh start will be good for all of us." Liam's excited about it. Of course, he was. I just signed a lease near campus, lined up job interviews, and made plans for my future with Adrian. My family had decided to uproot everything without even telling me. "When were you planning to let me know?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "We assumed you'd want to come with us," she said lightly. Family sticks together after all. I laughed bitterly. Like you stuck by me when you stole my tuition money? That's not fair, she snapped. Oh! Is it fair that Liam took $5,000 from Grandma under false pretenses? Did he tell you about that? The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. Then, Liam explained that he was desperate and Evelyn misunderstood. Stop, I interrupted, my voice trembling with anger. I have proof, bank records, messages, everything. He's been lying to you, to all of us. Don't, she said sharply, panic creeping into her voice. Don't you dare try to hurt your brother. He's fragile. Fragile? My hand tightened around my phone. Let me read you something. Last week, when you thought he was at therapy, he was actually. I don't want to hear it, she yelled, cutting me off. Why can't you just support him? Why do you always have to make things so difficult? The words stung. A wound that had been festering for years suddenly ripped open. 23 years of being the dependable one, swallowing my pain, being shoved aside for Liam's endless dramas, and I was the difficult one. You know what? I said quietly, each word deliberate. You're right. I am making this difficult. So let me make it simple. I'm not moving to New York. I'm not giving up my life for Liam anymore. And if you sell that house, the house we grew up in, don't expect me to ever come back. You don't mean that, she said, but her voice wavered. We're family. No, Mom. We're Liam's support system. There's a difference. After hanging up, I sat in the growing darkness of my room, my chest tight with a mix of anger and relief. My phone lit up with a text from Liam. Can't wait to be roomies again. Smiling face with smiling eyes, though maybe you should stay behind. Wouldn't want Adrian to feel too lonely without you. Winking face. The sheer audacity of his message sent a cold fire through me. For the first time, I didn't feel defeated. I felt ready to fight back. The implied threat in that last message from Liam made my blood run cold. I knew his pattern well. When he couldn't control someone, he found ways to destroy them. And now, he was turning his focus on Adrian. I called Adrian immediately. We need to talk. In person. Is everything okay? He asked, concern lacing his voice. No, I said, staring at Liam's message again. Nothing is okay. An hour later, I sat across from Adrian in his car, parked outside the coffee shop where he worked. I handed him my phone, showing him the messages, the evidence, and Liam's veiled threat. God, Adrian whispered, scrolling through the texts. Your brother, he's dangerous. He's moving to New York with my parents, I said, my voice shaking. They're selling the house and uprooting everything to cater to him. They expect me to go with them. Adrian's brows furrowed. What about us? Your plans here? They don't care, I said bitterly. They've never cared about anything but Liam. Adrian was silent for a long moment before he opened his glove compartment and pulled out a small box. I was going to wait until your graduation, he said, but maybe now's the right time. He opened it to reveal a simple but elegant engagement ring. Maybe it's time for us to make our own fresh start. Tears stung my eyes as I looked at the ring, then at Liam's threatening message glowing on my phone. I knew I had to make a choice, continue playing Liam's game and lose everything I'd worked for, or finally take control of my life. I slipped the ring onto my finger. If Liam wanted a war, he'd get one. But this time, I wasn't going to be the victim. The engagement ring felt heavy as I walked into my childhood home for the last time. My parents were hosting a farewell dinner before their move to New York, and I decided it was the perfect moment to make my own announcement. Adrian squeezed my hand as we approached the front door. Are you sure you want to do this? He asked softly. I nodded, though my stomach churned with nerves. Through the window, I could see Liam setting the table with Mom, his every move calculated to look helpful and endearing. He'd been suspiciously quiet since his threat about Adrian, which only heightened my unease. As soon as we stepped inside, Liam's eyes went straight to my hand. The sight of the ring made his smile falter for a fraction of a second before he plastered on his usual charming expression. Oh my God, are you engaged? Before I could respond, he pulled me into a dramatic hug. I'm so happy for you, he whispered in my ear, adding in a venomous tone, though it's a shame you won't get to have the wedding here since we're selling the house. My mother's reaction was more subdued. She stared at the ring, then at Adrian, as though seeing him for the first time. This is unexpected. Is it? I shot back. We've been together for 3 years. But with the move to New York. I'm not going to New York, I said firmly. I thought I made that clear. My father entered the room, his face creased with confusion. What's going on? Amara and Adrian are engaged, Liam announced, his voice syrupy sweet. Isn't it wonderful? Though the timing seems a bit rushed. Almost like a last-ditch attempt to avoid coming with us. It's not rushed, Adrian said, his tone steady. I've been planning this for months. Of course you have. Liam's smile didn't reach his eyes. I just hope Amara isn't using you to avoid her responsibilities. Responsibilities? I let out a bitter laugh. You mean sacrificing everything for you? Watching you manipulate everyone? Giving up my future so you can have another, fresh start? Amara, my mother warned, her voice sharp. Your brother is trying to get better. No, he's not, I said, pulling out my phone. He's trying to control us. And I can prove it. Liam's face darkened, his carefully curated composure cracking. Mom, she's doing it again, attacking me. I can't handle this. Stop it, I said, slamming my hand on the table. The room fell silent. Just stop. I'm done playing along with your act, Liam. For a moment, his mask slipped entirely, revealing the simmering rage beneath. But he quickly recovered, switching back to his practiced victim role. I can't believe you'd attack me like this, Amara. I love you. I just want us to be a family. We're not a family, I said quietly. We're your audience. And I'm done watching your show. I stood, taking Adrian's hand. Liam's voice followed me as I turned toward the door, now tinged with desperation. If you leave now, don't expect to be welcome back. I paused, looking at the scene one last time. Liam's crocodile tears, my mother's pleading eyes, my father's helpless confusion. The home that had been a stage for Liam's endless dramas. Don't worry, I said evenly. I won't be back. But remember this, Liam, you chose this. As Adrian and I walked out, Liam's wailing grew louder, my parents rushing to console him. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty walking away. I felt free. 3 weeks after the confrontation, my parents and Liam left for New York. I thought their absence would bring relief, but the emptiness of the house they left behind was suffocating. As I helped Evelyn pack up the last of their belongings, silence in each room, as though memories, some good, but many evil. Hard, isn't it? Evelyn said, placing a hand on my shoulder. I nodded. It feels like the end of something. It is, she said. But endings make space for new beginnings. For the first time in a long time, I believed her. 2 days after the hospital incident, I arrived home from work to an unwelcome sight, Harper's shiny new BMW parked behind Ethan's car in our driveway. My stomach dropped. My hands trembled as I unlocked the front door, and the scene inside stopped me cold. Harper was perched on the couch, dressed in one of my favorite dresses, the hem brushing her knees as she crossed her legs with practiced ease. Ethan stood by the window, his posture rigid, his face pale, maintaining as much distance from her as possible. "Oh, hi, sis," Harper said, her voice dripping with saccharine sweetness. "I was just telling Ethan how worried I've been about you, about your anger issues." My chest tightened, fury rising like a tidal wave. "Get out," I said, my voice low but steady, my hands curling into fists at my sides. Harper turned to Ethan with a look of feigned hurt. "See what I mean? She's always so hostile. Mom and Dad are terrified she might do something dangerous. That's why they left, you know. It's not because of me." Ethan glanced at me, his expression unreadable, but I could see the tension in his jaw. Harper had been weaving her web, and I didn't know how much damage she'd already done. "Harper," I said, stepping further into the room, "I'm not going to ask you again. Leave. Now." She leaned back on the couch, spreading her arms in a gesture of exaggerated innocence. "Why are you so upset?" "I just came to check on you. Family looks out for each other, don't they?" I clenched my teeth, biting back the torrent of words threatening to spill out. Harper wasn't here to check on me. She was here to push me, to see how far she could go, to drive a wedge between me and Ethan. Ethan finally spoke, his voice calm but firm. "Harper, I think it's time for you to go." She tilted her head, giving him a sly smile. "Oh, Ethan, you don't need to protect her. I'm not the enemy here." "No," I said sharply, cutting her off. "You are. And you've been my enemy for years. You don't come into my home, touch my things, or manipulate the people I care about. Get out!" Her mask cracked for just a moment, her eyes flashing with anger before she replaced it with a fake smile. She stood slowly, smoothing the stolen dress over her hips. "Fine. But when you're ready to apologize, you know where to find me." As she brushed past me, I caught the faint scent of my own perfume. My stomach churned, a visceral reaction to the intrusion, the violation. I stayed rooted to the spot until I heard her car start and pull away. Ethan crossed the room to me, placing a hand on my shoulder. "Are you okay?" I let out a shaky breath, the adrenaline coursing through me, leaving a heavy fatigue in its wake. "No," I admitted. "But I will be." Ethan pulled me into a hug, his arms grounding me. "She doesn't control us, Sar. Not anymore." "She's not going to stop," I said, my voice muffled against his chest. "She'll keep pushing, keep finding ways to worm her way back in. Then we'll push back," he said firmly. Together. The next day, I changed the locks on the house. I packed up every item Harper had ever touched, worn, or claimed as her own, boxing them up and leaving them on my parents' front porch with a simple note: "Harper's belongings. Do not return to sender." My phone buzzed relentlessly that evening, texts and missed calls from Harper, my mother, and even my father. I ignored them all, silencing the device and tossing it onto the counter. "She's going to escalate," I said to Ethan as we sat on the couch, the tension still palpable in the room. "Then let her," he replied, taking my hand. "We've got everything we need to show the truth, Sar. She can't twist this forever." He was right. I wasn't powerless anymore. Harper had spent years controlling the narrative, but now I held the evidence, the resolve, and the support I needed to finally dismantle her web of lies. It wasn't just about protecting myself anymore. It was about reclaiming my life and ensuring that Harper could no longer destroy anyone else's. Harper's fury was like a storm I could feel brewing even before she spoke, her practiced grace shattering as she snatched the restraining order from my hand. Her lips trembled, but the tears in her eyes were no longer a performance. They were born of the realization that her control over me was truly slipping. "You can't do this," she whispered, her voice cracking as she clutched the paper. "We're family." "No, Harper," I said, my voice steady. "We're not. Not in the way that matters." When she lunged at me, desperation driving her forward, I was ready. Ethan stepped between us without hesitation, his arms a protective barrier. Harper stumbled back, her expression a mix of disbelief and rage. The invincibility she had worn for so long was gone. "Get out," I repeated firmly, pointing to the door. "And know this, if you ever come near me or Ethan again, I won't hold back. I'll release everything. The recordings. The evidence. Every single truth you've buried." Her shoulders sagged, her mask of power crumbling as the weight of her exposure bore down on her. Real tears streaked her face this time, but they didn't move me. "You'll regret this," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You need me." "No, Harper," I said softly. "I don't. Not anymore." She hesitated in the doorway, her presence suddenly smaller, like a shadow fading with the light. Then she turned and left, the sound of her car engine cutting through the quiet as she drove away for the last time. Ethan wrapped his arms around me as the door clicked shut. My body trembled, not from fear or sadness, but from relief, a deep, visceral release of years of pain and manipulation. For the first time, I felt truly free. 6 months after Harper's last attempt to control my life, I stood on the stage at my college graduation, dressed in my cap and gown. The applause was deafening as my name was called, but my eyes instinctively searched the crowd. For a fleeting moment, I expected to see my parents sitting there, smiling and proud. But they weren't. Instead, I found Ethan and Grandma Evelyn in the front row, their faces radiant with genuine pride. They were my real family, the ones who stood by me not out of obligation, but out of love. Later, at a quiet celebration dinner, Evelyn leaned across the table, her eyes twinkling with that familiar mix of wisdom and mischief. "Your parents called," she said, her tone neutral. "They wanted to know if you'd reconsider moving to California. Harper's apparently doing better." I stirred my coffee slowly, watching the cream swirl into delicate patterns. "And what did you tell them?" "I told them they should have been here today," she said simply. Then she reached into her purse, pulling out an envelope and placing it in front of me. "Which is why I want you to have this now, instead of later." Curious, I opened the envelope and pulled out a letter from her lawyer. The words on the page made my hands tremble. "Grandma, this is your inheritance." "Yes," she said firmly. "But I'm not waiting until I'm gone to help you build the life you deserve." She reached out, placing her hand over mine. "I've watched you fight for yourself this past year, and I couldn't be prouder. It's time someone fought for you, too." The amount was more than enough to start the marketing firm I'd been dreaming of, a chance to break free entirely and live life on my own terms. "Harper will be furious," I said with a small smile, though the thought didn't sting like it once would have. "Harper needs to learn that actions have consequences," Evelyn replied, her tone as firm as her resolve. "And your parents need to understand that enabling isn't the same as loving." For the first time in years, I felt like I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. I no longer needed Harper's approval, my parents' validation, or their definition of family. I was finally in control of my own story, and I knew exactly where it was headed. My phone buzzed, a text from my mother. "Harper saw your graduation photos online. She's upset you didn't invite us. Please call." I stared at the message for a moment, then deleted it without replying. "You know what the strangest part is?" I said, turning to Evelyn. I thought standing up to Harper would feel like revenge, like I was finally setting things right. But when I finally did it, it wasn't about revenge at all. Evelyn tilted her head, her wise eyes softening. "Then what was it about?" "Freedom from her, from their expectations, from who they made me believe I had to be." Ethan slid into the booth beside me, his grin contagious. "Speaking of freedom, I have news." He leaned forward, his excitement radiating. "The Chicago firm called. They want both of us, you for marketing, me for development. We can start next month." For the first time in a long time, I felt something settle inside me. Not happiness exactly, but a calm, steady peace. "What do you think, Grandma?" I asked with a small smile. "Should we go?" She studied me carefully, her expression thoughtful. "I think you spent far too much time wondering what other people think you should do. Maybe it's time you decided for yourself." She was right. Later that night, I sat at my desk, turning an old family photo over in my hands. It was the last one we'd taken before everything fell apart. Harper stood in the center, naturally, her smile bright and confident, with our parents on either side, their protective arms around her. I was on the edge, barely visible, already fading from the frame. My phone chimed again, this time with a new email. It was from Harper. "I'm sorry for everything, but I miss my big sister. Please come visit. I promise things will be different." For a fleeting moment, the familiar pull returned, the need to fix things, to play the role of the good sister, to find a way to keep the peace. But then my gaze fell on the things that had become symbols of my new life, the inheritance letter Evelyn had given me, the Chicago job offer sitting on my desk, and my engagement ring glinting under the lamp. It hit me then, as clear as day, sometimes the happiest endings don't involve forgiveness. Sometimes they simply involve freedom. I opened my laptop and began typing. "Harper, I hope you find what you're looking for. I hope you heal, grow, and learn to be happy without needing to control everyone around you. But I won't be there to see it. I'm not your audience anymore. I'm not your victim. I'm not your sister. I'm just free." I hit send, my fingers hovering over the keyboard for a moment before blocking her email address entirely. The family photo stared up at me from the desk, its edges slightly bent. I picked it up, looked at it one last time, and then dropped it into the trash. Tomorrow, Ethan and I would begin planning our move to Chicago. Tomorrow, I'd dive headfirst into building my marketing firm, fueled by Evelyn's belief in me. Tomorrow, I'd continue to shape the life I was always meant to live. But tonight, I sat in the stillness of my freedom, letting the quiet settle into my bones. I'd fought so hard to get here, and for the first time, I allowed myself to feel the weight lift, to breathe fully and deeply. Some might call it revenge, that I ended up with everything Harper had tried to take from me. But the truth was, the best revenge wasn't hurting her. It was healing myself. And that's a victory no one, not Harper, not my parents, not anyone could ever take away.